The docking bay of the Galactic Academy pulsed with energy as hundreds of cadets streamed toward their assigned simulcraft. The final navigation exam had been announced the day before, and anticipation now hung in the recycled air like a static charge. The Nebula Gauntlet, as the instructors called it, was a closely guarded simulation built to test everything a future starship pilot needed to survive in uncharted space. Gravitational distortions, phantom signals, quantum storms, and fields that bent light, time, and logic. Every year, a few cadets failed so badly that their records were purged from the honors list entirely. But that only made it more legendary. Alien cadets from across the galaxy filed in with high spirits, their exosuits gleaming under the pale lighting. Tall, scaled Sorens chatted with glittering-eyed Ilari, while the crystalline-skinned Vakari hovered slightly above the ground, radiating pulses of low-frequency sound to map their surroundings. Most students looked like walking machines, each one fitted with neural links, pulse stabilizers, and sleek exohelmets that interfaced with their ship's nav cores. But one figure moved differently. Mara Lennox, a human cadet from Earth's outer colonies, walked briskly toward her bay, a satchel slung over one shoulder. She stood out not just because she lacked cybernetic implants, but because her ship looked ancient by comparison. While the alien crafts shimmered with AI-augmented hulls and dark matter propulsion, Mara's vessel had hard lines and physical buttons. It had a viewport instead of an integrated neural interface. And instead of an AI system, it had something no one else had brought, a rolled set of printed maps. "Where's the rest of your tech?" scoffed a cadet from the Azuril system as she passed. His symbiotic gear slithered over his shoulders, interfacing with his spinal port. Mara ignored the comment and climbed into her cockpit. The seat creaked, a sound no other cadet heard. As the canopy closed above her, she pulled the straps tight across her chest and reached into her satchel. She took out a bundle of laminated star charts, some printed on aged polymer from Earth's military archives. Most of the other cadets had laughed when she first brought them out during training exercises. One had even asked if she collected antique trash. But today, she placed them on the side console like talismans. Her hands moved methodically as she began her launch checklist. Unlike others, she could not rely on auto-calibration or predictive course plotting. Every parameter had to be entered manually. Fuel flow, steady, thruster heat, nominal, attitude controls, responsive. She spoke to no one. Her instructors had long since given up trying to convince her to upgrade. "You're only hurting yourself," one had told her bluntly. "This academy tests galactic standards, not your ancestors' fairy tales." But she believed in learning more than just machines. As the signal chimed across all comms, the bay doors began to open. One by one, the simulcraft lifted into the vacuum simulator, the walls of the academy disappearing behind them. It was not real space, not entirely. The academy had built a massive folded dimension, a virtual nebula stitched into an artificial region of space, fully immersive, unpredictable, and borderline sentient. Within it were fields of exotic matter, fake wormholes, and spectral anomalies pulled from real celestial scans. As Mara's ship accelerated, she could already hear the chatter across the cadet channels. "Colaris drift looks thicker than last year. Gravity wells on scan. Adjusting path. Nebula density up by 8%. She said nothing. Her screen flickered with static. Her instruments began reading false positives as expected. That was the point of the gauntlet. Over-reliance on technology would fail you. She looked out through her viewport instead, letting her eyes adjust to the simulated star field. Already the nebula loomed ahead like a claw of blue and violet smoke. It shimmered with unstable light, curling with invisible mass. Cadets ahead of her vanished into the mist, their comms filled with reports of unusual shifts. One reported spiraling without cause, another's AI shut down to avoid conflicting orders. Mara gripped her controls and adjusted her yaw manually, steering the ship into the turbulence with the patience of someone who had driven tractors through dust storms back on her family's farming colony. The simulation's pressure was psychological as much as technical. The silence between comms bursts grew longer. No one wanted to admit their nav systems were faltering. No one wanted to ask for help. But Mara could already sense it. Most were relying on predictive vectors that no longer held true. She watched one cadet's ship flicker on her radar before blinking out, likely caught in a gravity snare. Another overshot the simulation's safe corridor and vanished into a synthetic plasma field. She pulled her first map from the side and unrolled it across the narrow panel beside her. It showed the ancient constellations of the Orion Arm, remapped to account for time-lapse and nebular distortion. The map had been compiled by old Earth astronomers, then updated by deep space miners and rogue explorers long before the Academy ever existed. No AI read it, no software validated it, but she had memorized its logic. Aligning the three visible stars she could still identify through the viewport, one bright blue, one orange, and one pale green, she plotted her relative position. Then she glanced at her velocity and made a fractional correction, nudging her pitch to avoid a growing fluctuation she felt more than saw. The ship rattled as it pierced a pressure wave. Her instruments screamed, false alarms. She ignored them. The nebula around her grew brighter, hotter in hue. She was approaching the core of the simulation. Here, most cadets would make their biggest mistake, trusting what they saw. The illusion was designed to mislead, stars that weren't real, gravity that reversed without warning. Only by plotting a course based on fixed spatial anchors, manual ones, could she pass through without falling into recursive drift. Mara exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog slightly in the cold of her cockpit. The heat dispersers were struggling, but she wasn't bothered. She'd flown colder. She reached down and tapped a small mechanical timer, a relic of human shuttle training, and began counting seconds before the next predicted fold. Her chart suggested a curve, a strange one, a turn most would never consider because it led directly into an apparent hazard zone. But if she turned now, she could slingshot around the distortion and cut travel time by 30%. She took the risk. Her ship dipped left, rolling through the purple haze like a leaf caught in a wave. Red warning lights pulsed angrily on her dash, but she ignored them. Instead, she checked her second map, a backup she'd drawn by hand during a previous sim run, noting stable anchor points the AI ignored. Just as predicted, the wave broke. Her ship surged forward, cleared the loop, and emerged into calm space beyond the core. Only silence greeted her comms, then static, followed by a broken signal. Lost nav, unknown coordinates, spinning. She recognized the voice. It was Cadet Thilar from the Varnari system. Brilliant, but completely dependent on AI calibration. His ship must have failed. His nav core likely crashed in the distortion, leaving him directionless in a simulated void that could reset his position every few seconds. Mara reached for her transmitter but paused. The instructors would be watching. Intervening might cost her points. But the silence that followed pushed the doubt aside. She flipped the switch and broadcasted. Thilar, align your ship to the brightest green star ahead of you. It's not in your database, it's from the original Earth constellation map. Use it as your anchor. I'll send coordinates. She opened her third map and began plotting his possible position manually. The exam wasn't over, but already Mara Lennox had crossed a threshold no one else could see. She wasn't just passing the test, she was rewriting how it could be solved. The outer edge of the Colaris drift peeled away behind Mara's ship like the dissolving skin of a mirage. Her trajectory had taken her through the gravitational ripple just as expected, but the space beyond was anything but calm. Light twisted unnaturally in the darkness, stretching into threads that seemed to move even when she remained still. Her instruments couldn't interpret it. None could. The AI cores in the Academy's crafts were never programmed for this part of the simulation. It was deliberately raw. This was where protocol failed and instinct took over. As Mara kept her course aligned with the faint green star ahead, she adjusted the throttle manually, dialing it back to avoid oversteering into the next fold. She could feel the simulation thickening, the way the virtual space coiled around the ship like syrup. It slowed reflexes, distorted sound, and blurred outlines. She had read about this phenomenon in a report by a human pilot who once navigated real quantum fog near the Pelona Expanse. The man had compared it to trying to whisper through a dream. Now she understood what he meant. A sharp buzz crackled through her comm. She tapped the receiver, filtering static until a half-audible voice emerged. "This is Cadet Yeri. Location unknown. Coordinates do not resolve. Unable to regain orientation. AI reboot unsuccessful." The voice was high and tight. Barely controlled panic laced beneath each syllable. Yuri was one of the top-performing cadets from the crystalline world of Athkes. Her ship was built with layers of refractive alloy that could split radar signals, but none of that mattered here. Mara switched to a broader comm channel. "Yuri, respond to this vector," she said, keeping her tone low and even. "Do you have any visible anchors outside the viewport?" "Negative," came the crackling reply. "Nothing is static. Everything shifts. It's impossible." Mara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached beneath her seat for the fourth chart she'd brought, a simplified variant of the earlier maps with overlaid adjustment curves for light phase anomalies. She cross-referenced the drift of the visible stars with the variants she now observed through the viewport. 3 points held steady, though faint. That was enough. "Yuri," she said again, "set your pitch to -15 and yaw to +6. Maintain throttle at quarter speed. You'll find a stable anchor ahead. It will look wrong, but it's real." No reply came, but that wasn't surprising. Many cadets in this part of the simulation were unable to communicate consistently. The deeper one went, the more the rules fell apart. Even the signal path itself was affected by the simulated anomalies. Mara couldn't afford to linger. She adjusted her own heading slightly and continued deeper into the region known unofficially as Sector Null. To her left, a strange shimmer bloomed. It wasn't light. It was more like a memory forming in mid-space. A ship, or what was left of one, spun slowly along an invisible axis, its hull bending in loops that broke physics. She recognized the markings. It was Cadet Hearn's vessel. He had gone in first, overly confident in his AI's predictive learning. The simulation had twisted his path into a feedback loop. Now the ship was trapped in an echo corridor, reliving the same moment over and over. Mara watched the glow of his thrusters flare and fade, then restart in perfect repetition. He couldn't even know he was trapped. To him, it would feel like he was making progress. She marked the coordinates and added a note on her slate, then turned away before the image disturbed her more than it already had. Simulation or not, that kind of loop could leave a real impact on the brain. Further into the drift, the temperature dropped sharply inside her cockpit. She rubbed her gloved fingers together and checked the systems, still stable. The cold was artificial, a stress factor designed by the instructors. She leaned into it, letting it sharpen her focus rather than numb it. Her fingers found the edge of the control panel, where she'd scratched a faint line during a past mission to mark the center when the lights failed. She didn't need her HUD. She needed her senses. Another signal burst in, this one from a deeper quadrant. "Requesting nav sync. Course divergence. Requesting override from Central AI." The voice didn't even identify itself. Whoever it was had defaulted to command language, trying to force the system to compensate. Mara shook her head. That was the last mistake most made, trusting the system when it was designed to betray. She responded with coordinates only. "Use visual alignment, no AI, no override, orient to the orange dwarf visible 3 degrees port side. Confirm resonance manually." The next 30 minutes passed in brutal quiet. Mara's course carried her along a corridor of simulated gravitational mines, small distortions that could tear a trajectory apart if triggered. Most cadets avoided this route, relying on their AI to suggest cleaner paths. But her maps had shown her a pattern. The mines cycled off intermittently, and when they did, a clear window appeared for precisely 17 seconds. It had taken her hours of previous simulation runs to notice. Now she waited for the exact moment. At the 15th second, she angled the ship down into the corridor. Her engines whispered as she coasted through. One light flared to her right, indicating a near miss, but she cleared it. When she emerged on the far side, her ship trembled and then stabilized. The field behind her began to collapse, one of the simulation's fail-safes to prevent cadets from backtracking. As she adjusted course, Mara caught a glimpse of another ship flashing red just below the drift horizon. It had spun off course, its position indicator spiraling. She recognized the signature, Cadet Nero, one of the Vakari. His species processed time differently, using pulse rhythms to anticipate events. It usually gave them an edge in combat simulators, but here, in a region where time bent and snapped without warning, his system would overload. She toggled a direct channel to his frequency. "Nero, your pulse sync is sabotaging your orientation. Shut it off. Manually recalibrate your tempo to external visuals. There's a reflective cluster ahead. Use it to reset your rhythm." A long pause followed. Then, understood. Initiating manual recalibration. She gave a tight nod. Nero had always been disciplined. If anyone could adapt mid-flight, it was him. But even so, she knew the simulation was pushing him beyond his biological thresholds. The instructors were watching everything. At that moment, the interior lighting of her ship dimmed slightly, then returned. A system hiccup. Not random. She checked the power core, normal, diagnostics clear. Then she saw it, a blinking point on her console. A craft moving erratically, spiraling on the outer edge of the void pocket. No signal, no comms. But the ship was human-made, her breath caught. That wasn't part of the sim. No other human cadets had reached this depth. She was the only one assigned to this path. Unless the system had generated a ghost signal, an echo of a past pilot. She had read once that certain regions of the Colaris drift simulation used fragments of past cadet performances to seed new challenges. Could this be one? Or had someone been here before her and failed? She hesitated. The signal was unstable, fading in and out. The course correction required to intercept it would take her off her plotted map. It would risk losing her stable trajectory. But if it was a real ship, real data, then someone had come this far without being recorded. That alone demanded attention. She reached for her slate and marked the location, noted the anomaly, then turned away. She couldn't afford the deviation now, not yet, but she would come back to it, if the simulation allowed. Ahead, her sensors picked up the edge of the final anomaly belt, a region of reverse light and refracted time, called simply the mirror. It was the halfway point and the most dangerous segment. The cadets who failed here were often logged as incomplete, their ships lost in recursive simulation files that even the instructors couldn't retrieve in real time. Mara took one more look at her map, then tapped the viewport glass once with her knuckle. The old signal flickered again in the corner of her HUD. Still there, still waiting. She pressed forward. The simulation wasn't over, but something about it had changed. Something was watching now. Not the instructors, not the cadets. Something inside the drift. The mirror was unlike any region Mara had passed through before. Even inside the Academy's other simulations, nothing compared to the disorientation it imposed. Shapes doubled and inverted across her viewport. Stars reflected in impossible geometries, sometimes above her, sometimes beneath, and sometimes from within her own cockpit glass. Light twisted inward, folding into prisms that shimmered and vanished. Mara adjusted her breathing, slowing it to steady her perception. If she focused too hard on any one direction, the entire field warped like a collapsing lens. She disengaged her inertial dampeners, letting her body feel the subtle shift of momentum. Her ship drifted forward like a paper lantern caught in a slow tide. The lights on her console pulsed at half intensity, reacting to electromagnetic bleed she couldn't neutralize. But the instruments weren't her priority anymore. She was watching for motion, real motion, outside the craft, in the tangle of fractured starlight. A glint flickered near her lower right, sharp and brief. She leaned forward and peered through the distortion. It wasn't light, not entirely. It was too irregular, too mechanical. She tapped her manual focus dial, narrowing the viewport's resolution. A ship, small, wobbling, with its stabilization jets misfiring, tumbled through the mirrored space. The hull shimmered with Varnari markings, but the flight path was random, chaotic. She activated the auxiliary receiver and scanned for its comm signature. No signal. Whoever piloted that vessel had lost both orientation and systems control. Yet the ship hadn't collapsed or been consumed by the mirror's recursive loops. That meant the pilot was resisting, manually keeping the ship from full system shutdown, a rare feat in this sector. She banked left, angling her thrusters to fall into a slow curve. She didn't rush. In the mirror, speed amplified distortion. The trick was to move gently, counterintuitively, like navigating ice that could shatter under pressure. As she drifted closer, she recognized the vessel's tail number, Varnari Cadet Thylar. He must have followed her coordinates earlier, but had veered off near the anomaly wall. She opened a direct channel, repeating a calm hailing pattern. No response. She rerouted to visual. The Varnari could interpret light pulses better than radio in high interference zones. She toggled her external lights and sent a slow sequence, triangle, pause, single flash, an Earth signal for standby. It was a basic code, but one taught to all cadets in joint operations. The tumbling ship jerked. Its main light blinked once, then again. She exhaled in relief. He was still conscious. She pulsed again. Hold vector, stabilize yaw. I'll sink manually. Then she began the process of realignment, not through direct assistance, but by positioning her ship as a visible anchor. She drifted slowly ahead of his vessel, keeping her lights steady. As expected, his system tried to follow. After a minute, the Varnari ship stopped spinning. It wobbled, but it held. Then, from behind her, another burst of motion. This one was faster, almost violent. A third ship, flashing erratically, emerged from the far edge of the mirror, colliding with its own distorted afterimage. The result sent it careening off-path, trailing ionized gas. The symbol on its wing was Zarthian, Cadet Jurin. He was one of the most vocal skeptics of Mara's methods. She hadn't expected him to come this deep. His ship spiraled dangerously, too fast for the simulation stabilizers to compensate. She turned on her wide-range broadcast. Jurin, kill all nav assist. Your AI is feeding back into the mirror. Go fully manual or you'll be locked into a false horizon. Static erupted in response, but through the garbled mess, she heard a rough voice bark back. What the hell is this place? I can't find center. My orientation won't hold. Shut off your visual overlay, she instructed. Use raw vision only. Track my light beacon. You'll see it once you stop relying on your HUD. He didn't answer, but his ship's spinning slowed after a few seconds. His onboard systems must have finally cut the visual layer. Mara switched her external lights to a stronger pattern, Earth Maritime Guidance Mode, used in deep fog. Slowly, his ship adjusted course, pulling closer. The three ships now hovered in a fragile line, drifting forward through the refracted void. Mara kept her course tight, moving only when both others showed minimal deviation. She couldn't hold their hands. She wasn't leading them. She was simply staying visible, a point of trust in a place built to erase orientation. Then the darkness around them pulsed. Not a light, not a sensor glitch, a real shift. Mara's fingers clenched around her controls. The mirror didn't do that. She had studied its patterns. This wasn't a programmed anomaly. This was something reactive. From the center of the void ahead, a ripple passed outward, like gravity yawning. Her ship's frame groaned softly. Both cadets behind her fell slightly off path. Mara steadied her own heading and began a scan, not of the usual anomalies, but of the raw subspace activity in the sim's core. An unauthorized object was present, a structure. She magnified her viewport, boosting the contrast until the outline emerged. It was faint, angular, like a scaffold caught between dimensions. The object pulsed slightly, not with light, but with memory. She blinked, and the image shifted, showing a brief glimpse of a ship long lost in Academy records. A human frigate, not part of the sim. Her breath caught. This was the source of the echo she'd seen earlier. She tapped into her system logs, checking for metadata. The ship bore no registry, no call sign, but she recognized the shape. It matched diagrams from a decommissioned vessel lost decades ago during a prototype simulation. The program had been abandoned after the pilot never returned. Yet the ship was here, flickering in and out like a ghost. She reached for her manual chart book again and flipped to a folded section in the back. Personal notes, old rumors, drawings from black box fragments collected by human engineers. She compared angles, matched it to the image ahead. It was the Icarian, a myth among human cadets. According to buried logs, it was the first human vessel to attempt navigation of the Calaris Drift without AI assistance. The pilot's name had been struck from the records. The ship's data blacked out. Many said it was erased because the pilot had found something inside the simulation that the Academy wanted hidden. Now it floated ahead of her, half-phased, bleeding its presence into the mirror's core. She keyed her mic again, this time to both cadets. Thilar, Jurin, anchor your ships here. Do not follow. I'm moving ahead to investigate. No, came Jurin's voice, stronger now. We came this far because of your maps. You don't get to go dark now. This isn't part of the test, Mara replied. If that object reacts badly, your ships won't survive the backlash. Stay back. Thilar spoke next, calm and distant. We're already past the point of retrieval. This is no longer about passing. This is about understanding. Mara hesitated. She looked again at the shadow of the Icarian flickering in the darkness. It didn't move. It didn't react. But she could feel something watching, even though no sentient presence had declared itself. She transmitted her own coordinates to the others. Then keep exact distance, no deviations. And with that, she adjusted her course and guided her ship forward, deeper into the place where space folded around a lost memory, toward the ship flown by the first human who had tried to read the stars with his own eyes instead of code. The void narrowed, and the reflection of her own vessel shimmered against the hull of the Icarian. As her craft floated silently closer, the noise in her cabin vanished, not muted, not distorted, gone. Not even her own breath sounded in her ears. The ship ahead lit up with one tiny pulse of light from its hull, 3 flashes, exactly the pattern she had used earlier. A signal. Someone, or something, had just answered. The pulse of light from the Icarian's hull dissolved into the mirror's haze almost as quickly as it had appeared, but for Mara, it lingered like an imprint behind her eyes. Her ship drifted toward the vessel with a reverence she hadn't expected to feel. The closer she came, the more the Icarian seemed to solidify, not entirely real, but no longer just a fragment. The edges of its frame glinted with a bronze hue foreign to modern alloys. Its surface bore no scorch marks, no pockmarks from simulation damage, only the wear of time. It felt untouched, suspended outside consequence. Inside her cockpit, all readings flattened, no interference, no electromagnetic spikes. Even the distortion field of the mirror calmed slightly, as if the simulation itself had withdrawn in the presence of the relic. She brought her ship to a full stop, hovering barely 30 meters from the Icarian's starboard side. Her hand hovered over the manual transmission switch, but she hesitated. Any direct contact could destabilize the system or trigger whatever remained inside. Behind her, both Thilar and Jurin stayed in position. She saw their ships on the long-range display, holding distance, dim and motionless. Neither interrupted. Whatever doubts they may have harbored had evaporated in the presence of this impossible ship. Mara opened her external comms and activated her beacon lights again, repeating the signal. Triangle, pause, flash. The space between her and the Icarian shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging the effort. No transmission came back. She reached for her notebook, the old one with hand-drawn constellations and annotations made by her grandfather during his final freighter missions near Proxima. She flipped to the back cover and reread a phrase he'd written in a half-faded marker. Maps remember even when machines forget. That had always sounded poetic to her, until now. She tilted her viewport upward and studied the star pattern above the Icarian. Oddly, the usual distortion effect was weaker here. Constellations stayed still, angles held their geometry. She pulled out the original Earth map overlay and began comparing points. Within moments, she realized something astounding. The Icarian was positioned precisely at the intersection of 3 mapped constellations, Triangulum, Perseus, and Auriga, adjusted for cosmic drift. The alignment was deliberate. It formed a navigational anchor, one she had only theorized on paper, a marker in space so old, so pure, that the simulation engine had been forced to stabilize itself around it. Her pulse quickened. She reached for her internal recorder and began documenting the coordinates. But halfway through her sentence, the lights inside the Icarian flickered. Not just a reflexive pulse, an internal shift. Her audio cut out for exactly 3 seconds. Then a whisper threaded into her comm feed. Not a voice, not language, a pattern. She froze. 3 long pulses, 2 short, 1 long, a pause, then again. It wasn't random. It wasn't human either, but it followed rhythmic intent. She dug through her notebook again, searching for the Morse translations used during ancient Earth naval communications. It wasn't a perfect match, but it resembled a request. Hold. She didn't transmit anything back. She simply nodded once and waited. Moments later, a soft pull tugged at her ship, not gravitational, more like magnetic persuasion. Her vessel didn't move, but the field around her shifted, tightening like a gentle hand. A data stream began to crawl across her backup panel, unprompted, in a format no Academy ship used. She recognized the code base. It was a human encryption model, ancient military class, long deprecated. Someone had preserved it. The message decoded slowly, each character stalling before appearing. If you see this, you found the stars. Others used systems. You used eyes. She stared at the words. Then a second line appeared. This ship is memory. It holds the course not written in algorithms. Mara didn't understand what entity was transmitting these words. It couldn't be a live person. The Icarian had been gone too long, but the message was conscious, designed to speak only to someone who could reach it without machine guidance, a fail-safe against system corruption. Her mind raced with implications. If this simulation truly housed a vessel from a failed or forbidden project, then someone had embedded it with adaptive memory triggers. That would mean the Academy knew and had buried it. She reached for her slate and wrote down the entire message string. The ship's systems were not logging any of this. That fact alone confirmed its hidden nature. Then her external sensors chirped. A proximity alert. She glanced to the right. Jurin's ship had edged 10 meters closer, drifting against the command she'd given. His lights blinked rapidly, too fast for anything but panic. She switched to direct audio. Jurin, hold position. What are you doing? His voice snapped through the static. Something's moving out here. I thought it was you, but it passed between us. Fast. It wasn't a ship. Mara's heart thudded. Scan it. Already did. Nothing showed. She checked her own display. All clear. But she believed him. Then Thilar's voice emerged, softer and more grounded. I see something too. Near the mirror's edge. Not mass, not heat. A distortion. Mara peered back toward the simulation's horizon. She adjusted her optics and pushed the contrast. A flicker, then another, like a ripple traveling along a surface that wasn't supposed to bend. Her gut told her something had noticed the Icarian's reactivation, something the Academy hadn't programmed or had lost control over. She turned her mic back on. Jurin, Thilar, listen carefully. I need you both to align your nav systems to this star pattern. I'll transmit it. Forget the AI alignment. Use raw vectors. She sent the alignment data based on the Icarian's placement among the 3 constellations. It was rudimentary, analog, and completely outside the sim's standard orientation protocol, but it would anchor them to her position if the simulation began to fracture. A second data burst arrived on her console. Others are watching. They know this was found. They will reset soon. She whispered the words aloud as if speaking them would make them real. They will reset soon. Jurin's voice cut back in. We need to leave. I don't like this. Something's wrong here. Mara looked back at the Icarian. Its lights had faded again, but now its position wavered slightly, as though space around it was weakening. If the simulation initiated a reset, the ship would vanish, and everything she had uncovered would be erased. She opened the emergency log override, bypassing the auto-flag system. She encoded the Icarian's coordinates, star pattern, and full message history under a false training record and routed it to the Academy's deep archive channel. The system fought her, multiple access denials, until she rerouted through an unused Earth-class module reserved for outdated drone telemetry. It worked. Just as she hit send, the first signs of a system reset began. The mirror convulsed. All reflected stars began folding inward, collapsing into themselves. The simulation's sky darkened, not dimmed but devoured by cascading black that consumed the light geometry of the space. Brace! She shouted. Her ship rattled violently as the field's fabric strained. She looked back and saw Jurin's craft flash as his stabilizers failed. Thilar's ship spun once before righting. She reversed her thrusters, pulling back from the Icarian. It was disappearing, its hull peeling away, line by line, into code fragments. One last pulse of light blinked from its side. Triangle. Pause. Flash. Then it was gone. Silence fell again. The mirror returned to its previous state, fractured but stable. The field around her ship normalized. Readings came back online. But Mara knew nothing was the same. She turned her ship toward the next phase corridor. Both Jurin and Thilar followed without question. The Academy might erase what had happened, but the stars had spoken, and she had listened. The corridor beyond the mirror felt hollow in a way that went beyond spatial emptiness. The simulation had returned to its usual rhythm, Twinkling stars on a false horizon, artificial drift lines stabilizing the field, and soft pulses of proximity data scrolling across the console, but Mara knew something vital had gone missing. The Icarian's absence weighed heavily on her chest. Not just as a loss, but as a responsibility now passed to her. The fragment she had witnessed, no, the message, had chosen her as its keeper, whether she wanted that role or not. Thilar's ship drew closer on her left flank, moving in perfect synchronicity. Jurin hovered behind and slightly to the right, more distant than before, yet no longer radiating hostility. Neither of them spoke. Words had become fragile things after what they had seen. The silence between them carried its own form of reverence. Their trajectory pushed them toward the final phase checkpoint, a hollow sphere of blue-lit nodes rotating in a steady mathematical spiral. The Academy used it to signal the end of the trial. Once crossed, the simulation would disengage. But Mara didn't aim for the center immediately. She veered off slightly, angling toward the side perimeter. Her hands worked in slow, careful motions as she opened her final chart book, the one with stitched-together overlays from dozens of manually observed starscapes. She flipped to the back and began drawing. The constellations had shifted since the mirror collapsed. The sky above no longer bent in the same way. But something had aligned during that last moment, and she was determined to record it before it slipped from memory. Her stylus moved in precise arcs, sketching what she had seen around the Icarian, 3 intersecting points, bound not by gravity, but by purpose. A silent triangle of meaning buried beneath light years of simulation data. Her fingers trembled only once. She forced herself to keep going. The comms channel blinked. Jurin's voice, quieter now, came through. "You sending a report?" "Already sent it," she answered without turning. "Through the drone telemetry path. Used a deprecated protocol." He was quiet for a moment, then muttered, "Smart." Thilar spoke next, voice smooth and steady. "Will it reach the archive?" "It should," Mara said, "unless someone purges it." A pause. Then Thilar replied, "I don't think they will. Someone let that memory live this long. Maybe it was waiting for someone to speak with it again." She didn't answer. She simply looked back toward the empty void where the Icarian had flickered out of existence. What remained wasn't fear, but clarity. She had seen something older than the simulation, older than the Academy's current model of education and success. A record passed through forgotten technology, preserved not in code but in trust, in maps made by hand and stars read by eye. As she angled her ship back toward the phase gate, a new voice entered the channel. "Initiating retrieval protocol," said an instructor from command. "Mara Lennox, Jurin Vex, Thilar Soren, simulation complete. Return trajectory plotted. Debrief begins in 2 minutes." The voice was professional, detached. It had no clue what had actually transpired. Her screen blinked. A flight path appeared, generated by Academy systems, plotting her ship's course back through the retrieval tube. She ignored it. Instead, she plotted her own return manually, using the final triangle of stars now frozen above the gate. She transmitted her flight vector publicly, tagging it with her initials and the words, "Manual return, verified by constellation lock." Then she executed the path. Her ship glided smoothly toward the gate, passing through the field with barely a vibration. On the other side, she emerged into the Academy's simulated exit chamber, a vast virtual hangar shimmering with soft gold light. One by one, the other cadets appeared, blinking into place. Most of them showed signs of fatigue. Some looked confused. A few glanced around, clearly searching for someone to blame or something to explain why their methods hadn't worked. Mara's ship landed gently in her assigned bay. She powered it down, removed her flight straps, and climbed out in silence. When her boots touched the floor, no one clapped, no one cheered, but many turned to look. The instructors stood along the edge of the chamber, tablets in hand, their expressions unreadable. The lead evaluator, a tall man with cybernetic lenses embedded across his forehead, stepped forward. "Cadet Lennox," he said, voice firm, "you've completed the course." "Yes, sir." "We noticed your vector deviated from all predicted routes. Your AI assist logs were empty. You didn't use the Academy's nav systems." "No, sir." He paused. "And yet you led 2 cadets to successful completion, both of whom reported total AI failure." "Yes, sir." He raised one brow. You're aware that unauthorized protocols, such as manual guidance, are not recommended. I am. Another pause. Then he turned his tablet and showed her a screen. It was a scan of her chart, the one she had hand-drawn. He tapped the edge. We received this through a legacy channel. Very creative of you. Mara said nothing. Her hands were steady by her sides. The man looked at her a long moment, then gave a single nod. We're adding a new elective next term, he said. Pre-digital navigation. You'll be listed as its first contributing expert. He stepped back, and another instructor gestured toward the cadets, motioning them to the debriefing room. Mara followed the others, not out of pride, but with a strange quiet growing in her chest. She wasn't triumphant. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was simply certain now about something more enduring than technology. She had proven that knowledge need not evolve through replacement. It could survive through continuity. Later that evening, in her quarters, she opened her slate and pulled up the official logs. The mission summary had already been scrubbed of the Icarian. Nothing in the simulation's record referred to the ship. The anomalies were listed as data irregularities. The code distortions were blamed on legacy echo interference. But her file had been updated. At the bottom of her performance report, a single line had been added manually. Primary navigation achieved through constellation triangulation. Method verified. Memory honored. She smiled. Not because she'd won, but because the stars she trusted had spoken through her. Old knowledge had not only survived, but reshaped the future. And now, others would learn to see what machines could not.